it's scary. It's really, really scary when you go on those pages because, people are just talking about different medications, try this, do the other. I'm kind of having a terrible night. It's just really overwhelming and not helpful at all to be in those kind of groups. I wish I could have told myself that this will lead me somewhere else. That I could actually get to the other side, because when I was struggling with insomnia, I really didn't think I could. I was convinced that it was impossible. And I try to think that today, even, with issues I have or whatever, I think, oh, there's no way I'm going to get out of this. It's going to be so hard. But the insomnia experience helps me know that it's just, everything passes at the end of the day. So yeah, it's really that. I think it's don't be stubborn. And also, this is going to really help you later on in life.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another really special Talking Insomnia episode. We have Donna with us. Welcome.
Hi there, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Super nice getting to talk to you. And just for the audience to know, I sent an kind of a newsletter out to people and said, hey, are you interested in being a guest? And you replied. And I was really interested to talk to you because not only can we learn a lot from your insomnia journey, but you also work with helping people with insomnia at this point. And I was really curious about that as well. But let's start from the very beginning. How did you start having trouble sleeping?
Okay, so to try and kind of pinpoint it, I think it started when I was at university, actually. And I was on kind of strange schedules, but at that point I could accommodate because I didn't have many responsibilities. But when it actually became an issue was when I was living in Japan. I was working in hostess bars till very late at night, and I also had a job during the day. So the lack of sleep actually had a huge impact on me, and that's where it kind of came on my radar. I started to begin fearing not being able to sleep. So yeah, it was really at that point that I think that it began, and then it continued on for around 15 years after that. So yeah, it was quite a journey.
Got it. So in university, your schedule was off. Like you were a little bit worried maybe about your sleep, but you could just like sleep in, or you can just adjust that. But in Japan, it was different. You didn't have that option, right? So now,
right,
you were more worried about it.
Exactly. I had a real job and responsibilities and all the rest. So yeah, that made me kind of obliged to, you know, um, obliged to be able to sleep and perform well, if you like. And that's where the fear came in, because I wasn't, I didn't feel good enough because I wasn't sleeping well enough and wasn't productive and concentrating and all the rest. So yeah, it really came from that.
And during this time in Japan, did it stay sort of like something that bothered you quite a bit, like more than in university for a while, but you didn't fully go into kind of the rabbit hole, or did you at that point go into a place where you were like really worried and anxious about this?
No, for me, I was down the rabbit hole already. I was already on the endless search for solutions. So yeah, I remember that distinctly being an issue, and also accommodating my lack of sleep by not going out or not doing certain things. So yeah, it really became an issue when I was in Japan. So I was about 20, 21 years old.
Yeah. So you're young, you're in Japan, you're starting having trouble sleeping. And what are the first things that you try to remedy this?
Obviously, I went to the doctor. That's because that's the solution we think of first, and as much as they tried to help me, the first solution they have is usually medication. And it's not obviously the best solution in most cases. So for me, when I went to the doctors and I tried the different medications that would work initially, and then after two or 3 weeks or a month or so, it would stop working, I became really desperate because I was continually trying these potential solutions. They weren't working, and it was confirming to me that I had a severe illness, and even the doctor couldn't help me with it. So that's when it began to be a real fear for me. And at the same time, nobody could understand what I was going through. Friends and family, they just didn't get it. They didn't understand. And that's where it became really for me a huge worry, because I felt really alone. And even health professionals couldn't help me. So yeah, that was the worst part of it for me, was the lack of, if you like, empathy and support around my issue. So yeah, that was really when it appeared on the radar, and I started to navigate the labyrinth of solutions.
Yeah.
Potential solutions.
And how about, I want to ask, like work-wise, you were still doing kind of, you had a day job, you were still working, evenings as well. Were you kind of like muddling through, or did you have to kind of cut back, or how did that work?
I was muddling through, really, and I was also, at that age, I was in an exciting place. I was able to kind of keep the adrenaline going because I was living pretty much like in a film. I was in Japan, a Western in Japan, experience a new culture and experience a crazy job and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I did manage to keep going. But for me, later on down the line, I couldn't keep going, and it just became such a distress for me, that year in Japan, I really, really enjoyed it. I managed to get through and make the most of it. But, it really affected me later on when I started having a professional life in companies and that kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, that was really the beginning.
Yeah. Totally get it. And one thing I wanted to ask, which, a lot of the people who are tuning in will want to know and are curious about is like, during this time in Japan when this started, what were the nights like? Was it kind of like all-nighters where you didn't sleep, or was it more like, you never really had restful sleep or choppy? What was it like?
A mixture, it really depends. It really depended, all the way through. Sometimes I would be able to get to sleep. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I'd wake up, during the night. It really depended on the situation on the day. And that was pretty continual for me throughout. I just never knew whether I was going to be able to. Well, I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. That was pretty, that was for sure. But I didn't know, whether it would be 5 hours, whether it be 6 or whatever. I just didn't know. So
right.
yeah.
All right. So you get through this year in Japan, partly thanks to the fact that like the stress and anxiety around this was outweighed by like the excitement of this phase in your life, and then you move back to Europe, I'm assuming. And what happens next?
Yeah, I did move back to Europe, and it continued on. I continued seeing doctors. I did some sleep studies in Belgium, in France. The results were pretty much always the same. Oh no, your sleep structure's fine. You don't have restless legs. You don't have sleep apnea, and we don't know what to do with you. So here's some medication. Try that, and good luck. That was pretty much the response each time. So again, that was reconfirming that I had something really seriously wrong with me. Because the doctors were some of the best experts in these countries, and unfortunately at that time, insomnia was something that was not really on their radar. They didn't know how to handle it. So yeah, unfortunately that didn't work out either.
Yeah, totally here. So things, we actually started, like, just gonna share for the audience that we actually started recording for a few minutes, and then this is kind of a redo. So I know a few things, and one thing I know is that you said earlier that the approach was actually very similar in Japan to in Europe, and I just
it's copy paste, absolutely copy paste. I think also perhaps, I mean, you know better than me in the States, but when doctors go to school and study medicine, in the 7 to 9 years that they study, usually they have around 4 hours training on sleep. So they're not really, equipped to deal with people like, the kind of patients that I was. And it's very, very difficult. And it's not their fault. It's just that's how the education system is. So yeah, it was pretty much a copy paste in all the countries I was in, the different countries. So
yeah, I think it's the same here for sure, and for the
right,
reasons you mentioned. But all right, now at this point, like, we have a picture of what's happening. Basically, it's very similar, regardless of where you are. So I'm just gonna ask you, sort of like, what would you say is kind of the next thing that happens on in your story, if you will?
Okay. I would say I just kept going. I did the best I could. It was a struggle pretty much every day. It's hard to remember because it was a long period. And there were times when I slept okay, probably on vacation and that kind of thing, because I could, sleep longer or whatever. Taking into account that I had zero sleep education, I didn't know, the basics really. And yes, I think I did have some health professionals who would say to me, okay, you need to have a routine. You need to get up in the morning at a certain time. And, they did try to kind of encourage me to do the sleep hygiene. But at that point, I was so convinced that I had an illness and my issue was not that simple, that the getting up at 7 in the morning each day or whatever they recommended to me was not going to fix it. And I was pretty much convinced of that for a long time. And that was quite stubborn of me looking back now. But that's something we do get into because, when we see the doctor initially, they don't really have time to tell us, to give us these guidelines and insist that we try these things. So yeah, I think for me, it was mainly that.
Yeah, I totally hear. and work was challenging, but you still did it. And when would you say things started to, like, when did things start to change in terms of, like, when did you first start to get some sleep education and get some understanding?
Well, it's the typical story of the Sasha Stephens book that arrives on my doorstep. And, it was just amazing what happened in my case. So I'd struggled for 15 years. It was a combat every single day, pretty much every single day. And I'd been through so much, financially speaking. Also, you do have to invest in different types of medication and sophrology, or seeing these different health professionals. And I got the book, I opened the first page, and she described what I was going through. And it was the first time I'd ever felt empathy from anyone regarding my issue. Even though I've never met her, I was like, oh my God, there's somebody that understands. There's somebody that's been through this. I'm not the only one. And I think that was 50% of the solution in my case, because I thought, well, maybe she does know this lady does know how to help me. And I know it's unbelievable, but after 15 years of struggling with insomnia, I read the book. And I think on the same day, I put everything in place, and in 2 weeks, I slept well. Seriously.
Yeah.
That's what happened in my case, because she understood and I could trust her.
Yeah. Wow. And for those of you who are not, who don't know what we're talking about Sasha Stephens and the Effortless Sleep Method, which is an incredible book. And I couldn't help but think about the remarkable coincidence that Sasha herself, it was also exactly 15 years.
Yes, it was. Yeah. That was it. It's funny. Yeah, exactly.
So I can imagine that even more you could feel like a kind of a kinship with her, and like what she went through.
Absolutely. And she's also British. I'm British too, and I recognize the language, and I'd been through exactly what she'd been. Every single thing she was writing about, I could understand, and it was just, okay, well, this might work, and it did.
Yeah,
it really did.
Incredible.
And yeah, it's really incredible, and I'm so thankful to her. I haven't met her before, but I was just, because during those 15 years, I was absolutely convinced I'd never get through it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow. And before we go kind of further, and there like several questions I have for you, I just want to stay 1 second on the topic of Sasha Stephens. She's incredible. Like, when we had I think we had like about 900 subscribers on this channel. And she was always she was like my idol. Like I adored her books and her work and everything. And I sent an email, and I was like, she's never ever going to reply. And she asked her to be a guest, and she replied, and she was like, yeah, I'd be happy to be a guest. And she was a guest, and I get to speak with her, and it was incredible. And that conversation was so profound. Like, she talked about, this is actually a spiritual journey, and I never really thought of it. I was like, yeah, this is so true. So I just want to say shout out to Sasha Stephens. Incredible.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. My case too. So
now,
that's fantastic.
Apart from staying on the book topic for a second, like you said, 50% was just actually recognizing that there is somebody out there who understands me, who's gone through this, and who's done better. That was kind of half of what helped. And well, if you can remember, what do you think the sort of other half was, if anything?
Well, I think it was the 12 promises. Is that right? Something like
exactly.
that. So it was just from the understanding of the kind of the sleep hygiene aspect, and also, especially in my case, insomnia had really become my identity. So it was no longer talking about it. And I remember in the book that she recommends something like, if somebody asks you about how you slept or whatever, you say something positive or whatever. And I started telling people I was sleeping well. And it wasn't true at that point, but it was so empowering to actually change my mindset and be able to say, well, I'm sleeping fine. People would ask me because I was continually talking about it. And my response was always really positive, in the 2 weeks following, I'd read the book. And that was really, really helpful to me, was actually changing my mindset and saying, well, okay, so I didn't sleep well last night, but my sleep's getting better and I'm working on it. Changing really the thoughts around sleep really helped me. So it was that. It was also stopping looking for solutions, that really, really helped. And also for me, I was actually very stressed when I was in bed, anxious in bed if I wasn't sleeping. So getting up really helped me. Having, planning that in advance. In my case, it was really helpful to In fact, I lay down on the floor, on the cold floor, and that seemed to help me. I think that's what she recommended. So yeah, it was really just the putting in place the sleep hygiene kind of recommendations or rules, and the mindset.
Yeah.
And also understanding where it all came from. Understanding that it wasn't an illness and it was fear-based. That was something to me that was quite new.
Yeah.
Although perhaps I knew that deep down, I just hadn't really identified it. So yeah, that's where it came from, I think.
Very, very well. All right. So now, thanks for sharing all this. And now I'm curious, because I know that are you primarily working right now with helping people with sleep, or is that?
Yeah, indirectly. So basically, I work mostly in French in France, and my activities currently. So recently, I created a program which is called Sleepy, and it's a program to help people who are struggling with insomnia. It's only in French, and with another lady who also went through the same experience, 15 years too. And so we got together and we created the program, and it began a year and a half ago now, and it's really successful. So I'm really, really happy about that. The goal was really to help people, and it's working so well. So that's one thing that I'm working on. And then the other thing I'm working on now is something called In Sleep Lab. It's a company that helps employees to sleep better. So we do educational programs. There's also kind of a medical aspect to that. We have some doctors who are, more concentrating on the sleep apnea and that kind of thing. It's mostly working with shift workers, because of the different rhythms and helping employees who are, working shift work or work, with different schedules. So we're working on that at the moment, also creating a program for that. I'm also working with what's called the Institut Somna. It's a Canadian institute. It's also French speaking. And it's an institute that actually it does training programs for health professionals who need that, kind of that information, that knowledge about sleep to help their patients. Usually it's not doctors, it's more, like chiropractors or sophrologists or physiotherapists, that kind of profile. So the Institut Somna creates programs. They also do sleep coaching, so I trained with them. So I'm like a sleep therapist. I have a sleep therapist qualification from that institute. So yeah, it's a very varied program and really, really interesting. And actually, Veronique, who is the president of the Institut Somna, she also struggled with chronic insomnia for, I think it was 15 years too. I think so.
That's okay.
Yeah, so it's really varied and really interesting. And I did actually work with individual clients at the beginning, but I thought afterwards my impact could be greater if I was on a larger scale with a digital aspect too, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I've been doing this now for 2.5 years.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to ask about that. So you're trained through this French Canadian
Yes.
Insomnia.
Yes.
And but it was I'm guessing there was some time between, like, you found Sasha Stephens, things were getting easier for you, and you decided to do this work. Was it?
Yeah.
How did you get into this work?
Well, I had these really well-paid jobs in these big companies, doing these jobs that were completely meaningless, and kind of thinking to myself, well, what am I doing here? I didn't feel like I was making any difference or anything. And at some point, I think it was actually during COVID or just before COVID, I thought to myself, I need to do something that matters and not, do these jobs that don't really mean anything to me. And the only real pain that I had was the sleep. And I thought, well, I need to use my pain to help others in some way. That's really what made sense for me. And at that point, I didn't know a single thing about sleep. I'd actually seen the Matthew Walker book somewhere, and I thought to myself, I sleep well now. I don't need to spend any more time on sleep. Since then, I've read it, but I remember having that thought that the sleep's done. So I'd kind of moved away from any. Yeah, I'd kind of closed the chapter, and then I thought, no, this makes sense to do this, because it's one thing that I could do really well because I've been through it myself. So, and then I started becoming really interested in the sleep science, and circadian rhythm and all this knowledge that I'd never had before. And, you can can learn forever about sleep and psychology and all these different things. So I'm actually at the point now where I think to myself, I'm kind of glad I had it. Because the adversity really kind of fortifies you in some way, and it helps. It helps you to change path and become stronger and transform into something else. So yeah, I'm actually quite emotional talking about it because it's really real for me. It's made such a difference. So yeah, I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, wow. And yeah, and so you started reading and learning, and did you find this institute somehow kind of just randomly online, or how
Yes. Yeah, randomly. Actually, Veronique, who's the president, she actually appeared on a podcast that I listened to by chance, and then it came to mind, and I looked her up, and then I found out she had the institute and all the rest. So yeah, it was from there that I found her. Yeah, and the Institute Sumner, which is it's absolutely fantastic. It's actually got a lot of students who are more on the baby, the infant sleep side of things too. So yeah, it's quite varied.
All right. Yeah, no, this is great. We sometimes have people who comment on the channel or write emails and say, hey, I wouldn't work with somebody in French. And I've never known of anyone who does any of this work in French. So this is a great resources for the community for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. I can recommend 100%.
All right. Very well. Well, I have, two last questions that I ask everyone. And you kind of touched on it already, but one would be if you could, travel back in time to when you were, in Japan when this all started, and you could tell yourself something, what would you choose?
My first reaction to that would be to not to be so stubborn and actually listen, and understand that something simple can really help, and that my issue wasn't so unique at the end of the day. But I think also I wish I could have told myself that this will lead me somewhere else. That I could actually get to the other side, because when I was struggling with insomnia, I really didn't think I could. I was convinced that it was impossible. And I try to think that today, even, with issues I have or whatever, I think, oh, there's no way I'm going to get out of this. It's going to be so hard. But the insomnia experience helps me know that it's just, everything passes at the end of the day. So yeah, it's really that. I think it's the don't be stubborn, and also this is going to really help you later on in life.
Yeah. Wow. So powerful. And I actually just remember as you were sharing this, I remember another question I had for you earlier that was like, I made a mental note, and now I actually found the mental note again, which was this. I'm guessing, like, when you were again back there in Japan, how far along was the internet? Like, was it
exactly? Yeah, it wasn't far
there,
along.
right?
No, I had a little flip phone, so
yeah.
So
I want
yeah,
to
there
ask you,
wasn't.
like, the internet has made us just so much more connected, right? Which on one hand, I think is so helpful because you can actually find somebody who's going through what you're going through. You may not feel as isolated. On the other hand, the internet has led to a place where you get bombarded with solutions, right? And all these Facebook groups and Reddit groups are quite tricky for that reason. So what is your take on this? Like, do you think the internet is, I don't know, mostly something helpful that's wonderful, or mostly tricky, or how would it apply to your situation if you had the internet, do you think?
Well, I feel that, it's a double-edged sword at the end of the day. I think it depends where you are. If you find something like, if it's you search and you end up finding someone like you or someone like the Lancet Somna or whoever, it's fantastic. But if you start going down the rabbit holes on Facebook, I mean, for my studies, I was actually looking on the insomnia pages on Facebook to kind of understand how people were thinking. It's scary. It's really, really scary when you go on those pages, because people are just talking about different medications. Try this, do the other. I'm having a terrible night. It's just really overwhelming and not helpful at all to be in those kind of groups for me. So yeah, I think it depends where you end up. Because the solutions I now provide are on the internet too. So
yeah, exactly. It's how I see it too.
Yeah.
Like, it is that double-edged sword. It can be so helpful. We can actually find the real solution, which is partly that not looking for a solution, right? But you can also find so many other things that are unhelpful. So all right, well, let's conclude here. It's super nice connecting with you. And
yeah, you too. Fantastic. And thank you for all the work you do too. It's amazing.
Anytime.
Helping so many people.
it's always a pleasure to, get a chance to help people. So just be in touch, and we'll go from there. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Hi there, it's me, Coach Daniel, and I wanted to say thank you to everyone out there who is spreading the word. You know what I've noticed in the last 6 months to 12 months or something like that is when I ask people how they found us, one of the most common answers is somebody told me on Reddit. And every time I hear that, it really warms my heart. It makes me so glad to hear that someone went out of their way to tell a fellow human about the Sleep Coach School. If you're one of those people out there spreading the word, I want to say thank you so, so much. And if you're not, then maybe you'll see an invitation in doing so, or you can simply hit the like button or hit the subscribe button. That alone helps so, so much in getting our teachings out there and helping more and more people in the world. That was all I want to say here. Thanks so much for tuning in, and can't wait to see you again.